both of these groups that I'm describing, the traditional Christians and the traditional Messianics, both of them agree that works will not save you. Both of them agree that legalism is bad. It's just that the traditional Christians take it a step further and say that in order to avoid works and legalism, we just get rid of Torah altogether and practice and walk in law of Messiah. Whereas the traditional Messianics say, no, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We simply have to get rid of the dirt. We have to throw out the bathwater, which is the legalism, the dirty bathwater, and we keep the baby, which is genuine Torah observance, and this is what it looks like. There's another position that has come along lately, I want to say lately as of the 70s, especially when E.P. Sanders released his book in the late 70s, Paul and Palestinian Judaism. And he caused a firestorm among Christian commentaries because he challenged this idea that the first century Judaisms was a religion of works. E.P. Sanders, using research from the extant rabbinic writings and much of the early historic writings that have survived the destruction of the temple, as well as corroborating his information against the Dead Sea Scrolls information that is available to us today, he came to a conclusion that basically Paul's book of Galatians is not teaching, the Judaisms in Paul's day were not teaching a works righteousness based on keeping the law. Instead, they were teaching a grace-based relationship to God that was rooted in God's election of Israel as a covenant people. E.P. Sanders introduced a term known as covenantal nomism. And in a word, covenantal nomism is the idea that one's place in the covenant is determined by God's election, God's choosing, meaning it's not something that the person can do in and of themselves. So covenantal nomism is how one gets into a right covenant relationship with God. And so under the new perspectivist view, the Judaizers have been renamed as influencers. Mark Nanos gets credit for giving us that term, influencers. It's a little more it's a little less racially charged term, in my opinion, as a Jew. And so instead, the villains of the piece are not they're not Jews trying to bring the Gentiles under submission to the Torah of Moshe per se. Instead, they're Gentiles trying to bring they're Jewish people trying to bring Gentiles into submission to a ceremony known as the proselyte conversion ritual. And the purpose of turning Gentiles into Jews was because, according to the new perspectivist position, the NPP position, according to that view, the Jews of Paul's day, the covenantal nomism that they espoused to, believed in a limited view of election. God's election of Israel as a whole was described in terms of Jewish-only Israel. And so we got this idea of a national salvation, a national righteousness, a righteousness that is reserved only for ethnic Israel according to the flesh, which of course means Jews only. So according to this view, the only way for the Gentile Christians to receive the blessing spelled out in the Torah, which was reserved for Jews, the only way for the Gentiles to receive this is to be brought into the covenant as Jews, meaning, because they were not born Jews, they must actually take on the legal status of Jewishness. So this was essentially the viewpoint that E.P. Sanders described from his research. And in this view, Paul comes along and has to explain to the Gentile Christians that they do not need to submit to a ceremony of proselyte and change their status from Gentile to Jew in order to be counted by God as genuine covenant members. In other words, salvation does not hinge upon one's ethnicity, and covenant membership is not a Jewish-only prospect. From Paul's perspective, the Gentile Christians, by virtue of their faith in Jesus, already became genuine covenant members. They became Gentile covenant members, and they joined the covenant at that point by faith, not by ethnicity. And so in this scope, Paul doesn't have to wrest Torah away from the Gentile Christians as if they were misusing Torah in that fashion. Instead, Paul has to basically wrest circumcision away from them, because circumcision was the tool that was being misused by the Judaisms of Paul's day. And in this view of the book of Galatians, we don't have to have a disparaging view of Torah observance for a Gentile believer the way that Christianity does today.